I mean, I think that's the main thing is like have samples that show that exactly what your voice is and exactly what makes you different than everybody else and what you can bring to the table that nobody else can. I think that's the first thing. But to get like those open writing assignments, I think it's just a fool's errand to even try because they're just so risk adverse to hire anybody that hasn't done it before. I think the better shot that you have is to make smaller things, and then they'll see you've done it.
You're listening to Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Jamin. Welcome back for another episode. I may be retitling the name of my podcast, so I'm going to be vague. I'm going to be vague for everyone, but I'm here with my next guest, Adam Pava, who is a very talented writer. I worked with many years ago on a show called Martin DDS, and he works. I'll let you speak in a second, Pava. You just relax. I'm going to bring you on with a proper introduction because you've worked a lot of features, a lot of animation. So I'm going to run through some of your many credits. Some of them are credited and some of them are just are not so credited. We're going to talk about that, even though you've done the work. So I think you started early on shows like Clone High, Johnny Bravo. I'm going to skip around. You worked with us on Martin DDS, but then you've also done Monsters versus Aliens, Dragons. I'm going to jump around. But wait, hold on. I'm skipping a lot of your credits, Pava. A lot of the Boxtrolls you've done. You work a lot with Lord and Miller on all their stuff, all like the Lego movies, Goblins. You have something in the works with Leica, which is one of the big animation studios, which you're attached to direct as well. And then also some other shows. Let's mention My Little Pony. What else? Dreamland. What else should we talk about? Bunch of the Lego.
It's hard to talk about the credits because so many of them are things that are either in production or development that you're not supposed to talk about yet, or they're things that I was uncredited on, and so it's a weird thing.
And why are you uncredited? How does that work?
It's super different from TV and movies. So back when I worked in TV, I did TV. I mean, back when we worked together, it was like, 10, 15 years ago, something like that. But I did it. I did TV for like the first decade of my career. And everything you work on, you're credited, right? Even if you're just like the staff writer in the corner who says 3 words and doesn't get a joke into the script, you're one of the credited writers.
Right.
Movies are a different situation. Like it's like one of these dirty secrets of Hollywood where they always want to credit one writer or a team of writers. Sometimes it'll be, 2 writers that get the credit if both of them did a huge chunk of the work. But the thing that usually happens these days on big studio movies anyway, is they will go through 3 or 4 writers over the course of the years and years of it being in development. And all those writers who worked on it before the final writer, or sometimes like just the first writer and the last writer will get credit and all the ones in the middle won't get credit. Or it's like, the WGA has these arbitration rules where it's like, unless you did a certain percentage of the final shooting script, you're not going to get credit at all. So even though the guy who brings catering gets credit and every person on. So
but will you arbitrate for credit, or do you go into these projects knowing that you're not going to get credit?
Usually I go in knowing that I'm not going to get credit, or I will, sometimes there'll be a situation like I did about a year's worth of work on the Lego movie, the first Lego movie.
Right.
And, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who directed that and wrote the first draft of the script and the final drafts of the script, they're buddies of mine. And so I'm not going to arbitrate against them.
Right.
And I want them to hire me in the future. And I love them. And they really wanted, they're written and directed by, title. And so, of course, I'm not going to arbitrate in that sort of situation. And also, to be fair, I don't think I would win that arbitration because they wrote the first draft and it was already the idea and it was brilliant and it came out of their minds and it was awesome.
Right.
And then they had me do 4 or 5 drafts in the middle there where I was just addressing all the studio notes and all the notes from, the Lego Corporation and all the notes from like Lucasfilm and all that kind of stuff while they're off shooting 21 Jump Street. And then
so you were just doing it to move it closer, and then they knew they were
exactly. Exactly. They knew they were coming back onto it and they were going to direct it, and they would do another pass. They would do multiple passes because once it goes into storyboarding, once it's greenlit. So I was just trying to get it to the greenlit stage. So they'd written a draft, and then I did a bunch of drafts addressing all these notes, and then we got it greenlit off of my drafts. And then they came back on and they start the storyboard process and directing process, and the story changes so dramatically during that process anyway, that the final product is so far removed from the drafts I did anyway. But it was a valuable, my work was like needed to get it to that point to where they can jump back onto it. But like very little of that final movie is anything that I can take credit for, and I wouldn't want to take credit away from them on that. So I do a lot of that kind of work.
Did they have other writers that worked on Lego's movie as well, or just you?
On the first one, it was them and me. There was these two brothers, the Hageman brothers, who had done a very early treatment, but that had like set up the original idea for the movie of like a Lego man sort of becoming alive. And so they got a story by credit. And then they definitely always have like a stable of writers that they bring in to do punch-up work and to just like watch the animatics and give notes and stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of people that are contributing along the way.
Funny, because they come from TV, so they really run it. They run it like as if they're still on TV.
100%. Yeah, they have like their writers. And so I've gotten to work on a lot of their projects sort of as one of their staff writer type people, basically, is like the idea. So it's all uncredited work, but it's great work. They're such great guys, and you're working on really cool things every time. And so now there's in the last few years, like the WGA started this new thing called additional literary material credit. And so if Lego were to have come out now, I think I would have gotten that credit on it. But at the time that didn't exist. So I got a special thanks.
And how did you, oh really? Okay. And how did you meet these guys?
They gave me my first ever job before I knew you. I mean, I had written a movie script that was an animated movie. This is like 99 or 2000. I was like just out of grad school. I wrote it while I was in grad school. And
wait, hold on. I didn't even know you went to grad school. Did you study screenwriting in grad school?
Yeah, I went to USC screenwriting.
Oh, yeah. I did not.
I hide it from you.
Why do you hide it from me?
I don't know. It's like a weird thing where I feel like, it's like I was in this weird secondary program that wasn't part of the film school. It was the Masters of Professional Writing and Screenwriting. And so people would get confused, and I didn't want to like lead them on. But also, I just feel like it got me to a place, and then I was like, I didn't want to be like part of a good old boys club where people are just hiring USC people or whatever.
But that's the whole point of going to USC for
yeah, it was.
I mean, because people ask me, should I go to film school, get an MFA? And my standard answer is, no one will ever ask for your degree. No one cares about your degree. The only thing they care about is, can you put the words on the page that are good?
100%.
But why did you?
But what it did offer me, and I'll get back to how I met Phil and Chris in a little bit, but this is a good side conversation. Like, it gave me an opportunity to do some internships on a couple TV shows, and that was super, super valuable. So when I was at USC, it was 99 and 2000, and so I interned my first year on a little show called Friends, which was still on the air it was on the air at the time. I was just like the stage intern. So I was like moving the chairs around during the rehearsals and fetching, coffees and getting frozen yogurt for cast members or whatever. Like just, shitting my pants, trying to like be a normal human being around all these superstars. And it was not like, I wouldn't say it was the best experience of my life. It was definitely one of those things where I was like, everybody was super intimidating and everybody was really busy, and the cast were like in the middle of a renegotiation, so they were all showing up late. It just felt like everyone was angry the whole time, and I was like, I don't know if I want to work in TV. But there was one writer's assistant who was just like, yeah, because you're on the stage, you're a writer, you need to be in a writer's room, you should like be an intern in a writer's room. And I was like, oh. And then so I was able to get an internship on Malcolm in the Middle, which had just sold, and it was in his first year. So I started, it was like a summer show. So I jumped onto that in the summer and was able to do that. And then in that writer's room, I was like, oh, these are my people. These are actual.
Wait,
like,
you were an intern, they let you sit in the writer's room?
It was like, for every like, doing all like getting the lunches and making the coffee and all that stuff, they would like, Linwood was nice enough to like, let me just observe in the room for like one day a week, just to like, well, if I didn't have other stuff I needed to get done, so it was super nice, as long as I didn't pitch or say anything. And I never would. But it was cool to like, that experience showed me like, because that show is so well written and it was
Yeah.
so tight. And those writers were all like geniuses, or I thought they were all geniuses. And then I'd go in the room. First, I would read the scripts and I would think, oh my God, I'd never be able to do this.
Yeah.
And then I got in the room and I'm like, oh no, they're just working really, really hard and like banging their head against the wall until they come up with a perfect joke.
Yeah.
And then by the time it's done, it seems like it's genius, but it all was just really hard work,
Yeah.
really long hours to get to that place. So that taught me like, oh, maybe I can be one of those people. If I'm just one cog in this room, I could do that, you know?
Right.
And so that gave me sort of the confidence to do that. But so I had done those, getting back, I can loop back into the Phil and Chris thing now, because it's actually connects really well. I had done those internships. I graduated USC and I had this script that I'd written as like my final project or whatever. And it was an animated movie. And I thought you could just sell an animated movie, but I didn't know, they didn't teach me this in grad school, that at the time they develop them all in-house. It was like only Disney and DreamWorks were doing them at the time. This is 2000. And they just hire, you know, directors and storyboard artists in-house to sort of create the stories, or back then that's how they would do it. And so I sent it to some agents, and the response was always like, hey, you're a really funny writer, this is really good. I can't sell this. I don't know anybody that buys animated movies, but you should write a live action movie if you can write it as good as this. And so I wrote another movie that was live action, but it was silly. It was like, it seemed like it might as well have been I go back and read it now and I'm like, it's basically an animated movie, but it didn't say it was animated. It was live action human beings. And I submitted it to a small boutique agency at the time called Broder. I don't know if you remember them.
Broder, Crowell and After, we were there.
Yeah. And so Matt Rice was an agent there at the time, and he had on his desk, his assistant was Bill Zotti. I don't know if you know him. He's like a big name agent now, but he was an assistant at the time. He read that script that I wrote and was like, oh, you know who this reminds me of? These other clients that Matt has, Phil and Chris. And so he passed it on to those guys, and they were looking for a writer's assistant on Clone High because they had just sold their first TV show. They were young hotshot writers that were just like had a deal. And so I met with Phil and Chris, and they hired me as the writer's assistant on Clone High, which was like, they were the same age as me. They were just like, we don't know what we're doing. But they're like, you've been in a writer's room. You've been on Malcolm in the Middle and at Friends, and you don't know. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was doing at all, but it said on my resume that I had had these experiences. So they thought I would be a good writer's assistant for that reason. But they were the coolest dudes. Like from the very beginning, they were just like, you're the writer's assistant, but also you should pitch in the room. You should like act like you're another writer. We have a really small staff. Like we have 7 writers and you're going to get episode 8. I mean, it was crazy. Like they were just like, they gave me a freelance freshman. They were like, and that never happens anymore.
And
like,
how did they get an overall deal when they came?
Oh my, it's the craziest thing. So they went to Dartmouth. They met each other at Dartmouth. And then they were doing cartoons while they were there, studying animation. And one of Phil's, I think it was Phil, or I'm not sure. I think it was Phil won the Student Academy Award, like for a student film that he did. And it was written about in the Dartmouth Alumni Magazine. And there was a development exec at Disney who was like, whose son went to Dartmouth and read that article and was like, hey, like called them in their dorm room and were like, if you guys ever go out to LA, let me know, we'll set a meeting. And they literally the day after they graduate just drove to LA and then like called them up and were like, we're ready to get hired.
And it worked, and they got hired.
They got hired just to do Saturday morning stuff, you know, and they did that for a little bit, and everything they were doing was too crazy for Saturday morning. But it was like Disney, but then Disney was like, well, you can start developing stuff for like, you know, our adult Disney, or like, you know, like for primetime stuff. And so they came up with the idea for Clone High, and it was originally sold to Fox as a pilot to be like after The Simpsons or whatever, but then it didn't get picked up, and then MTV picked it up, and then they had a show. So it's crazy.
What a trajectory their career has.
Yeah, I know. And now they're running Hollywood.
Yeah, so. Pretty much. Pretty much.
Yeah, they were good guys to meet right away. I mean, like honestly, it was like to become friends with them and just to ride their wake and get some of their sloppy seconds and some of their like the stuff that they don't want to deal with. Like it's honestly, it was great. Like, you know, it's like,
do they call you a lot with stuff like that? Like, hey, we don't want to do this. It's yours.
Now than they used to. I mean, there was a point where I was one of their like stable of guys that they would call. I think they have met a lot of people, you know, in the 20 years since then, you know. But early on, it was like, I mean, even like their first movie was Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and they brought me on to like help rewrite the third act at one point, and just like, you know, it was just like from then on, and like they would always send me their scripts and just to add jokes or to give feedback or whatever. And they've always been like that. And then like I've noticed like the last maybe 6 or 7 years as they've gotten these huge deals, and all their projects are now just these massive things. It's not quite the same relationship where they would just text me or email me and be like, hey, read this. Now it's like they have a whole team of people.
They have a machine now, right?
But you know, we still are friends, so it's like, and then things will come up where they'll hire me for things here and there.
Like, I wonder what, honestly, well, I don't want to make this interview about them, but it's so interesting. Like, I kind of think I wonder what it's like to be that busy. It almost feels like, oh my God, I'm too busy. You know, they're so busy.
They are the hardest working people I know. It's like people always wonder how their stuff comes out so good. And it's not that, I mean, honestly, it's just because they stay up later than everybody. They never stop tinkering with things. They are never satisfied. They always think the next thing they do is going to ruin their career. And so they're just, they run on like this fear that propels them, that they know, I mean, they harness it, you know, it's not like it's like a secret. They know that this is what makes them great. And you know, utilizing all their friends, utilizing like they're the kind of people that are like the best idea in the room wins. If you could be the PA or the head of the studio, and if you have a great idea, they're like, let's try it, you know. And they also try a lot of stuff that doesn't work, and they're given the leeway to go down a lot of dead ends and then realize that's not the answer, and then back up and then try it again and try it again and try it again. And that's how a lot of animated movies are done. And so it drives everybody crazy, but also creates amazing product, you know.
That's what because I've interviewed a couple of guys who worked at DreamWorks, with John Abel, who does a lot of the Kung Fu Panda movies. And he describes it the same way. I was like, wow, it's so different from writing live action. It's so different from writing live action. The whole experience sounds exhausting to me. Do you find it the same?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started in it, I was like, this is ridiculous. Why don't they just write a script and then shoot the script? And like, you know, and then over the years, I've learned to love the process. I mean, I was frustrated early on when I would realize like how much gets thrown out and how much changes and how much it's just like it's out of the hands of one writer. And I think a lot of it is also just ego, thinking that you could do it better than everybody. And then once I embraced like, oh no, you have like a bunch of really brilliant storyboard artists, and you have a bunch of really brilliant like character designers and head of story and a director and all these different people who and layout artists, and like, you know, even the animators themselves, like they all add something so vital and valuable to it, and you learn stuff from each of their steps, and then you're just given the leeway to be able to like keep adjusting and adjusting until you get it right. And that's why animation comes out so much tighter often than live action, is just because you've been able to see the movie so many times and keep tweaking and tweaking until you get it right. Now, there is a point where sometimes I feel like you can take that too far, and then it just becomes like, we had a great version four drafts ago, and now we've lost our way, or like we're just spinning our wheels.
See, that's why I get lost, because sometimes I've been in shows where you rewrite something to death, and then you're like, and then someone says we should go back to the way it was, and I'm like, what was the way it was? I don't even remember anymore. You know,
100%, yeah. And I've stopped ever thinking you can do that. Like I used to think I would hold out hope that they'll realize that the earlier draft was better. They never do. It's like everybody forgets it, and then you just have to like have the confidence to be like, well, we know we'll come up with something better together, that it'll be from the collaborative mind of all of us. And then, you know, I think now I've seen actually the last few years there's a little bit of a tightening of the belt, like budgetarily, and that leads to faster schedules. And so instead of having like 7 times that you can throw the story up from beginning to end on the storyboards, like the reels, and watch this movie, you can only do it 3 times, or like, you know, and so that gives you a little bit more of a window of like, okay, we got to get it right in 3 drafts or whatever, in 3 storyboard drafts.
And who's driving the ship then in animation? Is it not the director? In this case, it's Lord and Miller, but They're the
Well,
writers.
Lord and Miller are often the directors, and so
Oh.
when they're the directors, they're in charge. When they're the producers, they're in charge.
Right.
So when they're like on the Spider-Verse movies, for example,
Mhm.
they're not. They're the writer, or Phil writes them, and then they hire directors. But Phil and Chris are the producers. But they're sort of like these super directors.
They're very unusual. Yeah, it's not how
Yeah,
it's usually
that's an
done.
unusual situation. But other movies, like the stuff I do at DreamWorks or the stuff I do at Leica, the director with Leica, it's like the director and the head of the studio, Travis Knight, who is like, it's his sandbox and it's his money because he's a billionaire that funds the
Right.
studio. He has the ultimate say, and so the directors are always kind of working with him. But it's like but it's always collaborative. It's always like you get in a room. So when I'm working at Leica, it's always like me, the director, and Travis, like trying to figure it out, and he's trusted me to like be I mean, I feel like he doesn't trust a lot of people because he's, kind of closed off in that way. But like, once you earn his trust, like you'll be in that room and you'll figure it out together or whatever. But every movie's different, and sometimes I'm on a movie just to like help fix it for a little bit, and then like, I'm just a fix it person that comes in for a little bit. Sometimes I just add jokes. Sometimes I just like, there's been movies where I've like, it was like a mystery animated movie, and they're like, "Can you just rewrite the mystery?" And I was like, "What a weird assignment!" But I had like 3 weeks to.
But in this case, they're calling you. How are you getting this work? Just reputation? They're calling you out of nowhere?
Mostly now it's reputation. I mean, sometimes I'll be submitted to it. Like, I mean, the first time it's always like you have to be submitted, and I mean, like I can tell you how I got hired on Boxtrolls because that was a big breakthrough to me because that was. I mean, it was after I'd done so Lego was obviously just having known and worked with Phil and Chris forever, and then they got hired on Jump Street, and they needed somebody that they trusted to like steer the ship for a while they were gone, and so I was able to do that, and that was like a huge, like, big break. It was like you couldn't ask for that. Like, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. But after that, at Leica, they had a draft of a movie before it was called Boxtrolls. It was called Here Be Monsters, and it had been in development for years and years and years, and gone through a bunch of writers, and they hadn't quite figured it out. It was kind of a mess. It was a big sprawling story that had a lot of moving parts to it, and they had heard that on Lego I was able to sort of harness a lot of like the crazy ideas that Phil and Chris had and put it into a structure that made sense. And so they asked me to come in and do the same thing. Or before they even did that, I did a punch up. Like I got hired to do a punch up on that movie, and I knew that it was going to be like a huge opportunity to impress them because I really, really wanted to work at Leica because at the time they had only had Coraline come out, and I loved that movie. And then I had seen like maybe Paranorman had come out, or it hadn't come out yet, but it was like about to, whatever. It was like, it was a new animation studio doing really unique original stuff. And I got asked to be part of this roundtable, and it was all these like heavy hitter, like Simpsons writers. It was like, it was like Jay Kogan and Gamble and Pross, and like, all these people that you're like, these are all legends. They've done a million shows, and they get hired to do punch ups all the time. That's like their bread and butter, right?
I'm not so sure anymore, but okay. Maybe
no, but this is in 2011 or whatever, so and I was like, I am going to take this script and like analyze it and come up with like character moments and come up with like, I'm not gonna be able to compete with those guys with like the best joke in the room necessarily. I'll have good jokes to pitch, but I'm gonna have like, oh, what if we adjust the character to be more like this? And then and where those guys were all, not those guys specifically, but the room in general, these were all guys who were like maybe reading 5 pages ahead and then, pitching off the top of their head. And I spent a couple of days writing jokes in the margin and ideas in the margin. And I like killed in that room. I just like, I got a lot of stuff in, and to the point where like a few months later, when they needed a big overhaul, they asked me to come in and do sort of what I had done on Lego, just take this big thing and hone it down into, so it was a rewrite job at the beginning. And then it turned into like 3 years of working with the director in the studio to like change that story. Like we threw everything out and started over basically a couple times over the course of those years.
But how are you getting paid? Are you getting paid on a weekly scale? Because I don't know how that would work. Do you get paid?
Yeah, it starts off with a draft, and then it's like it'll be a typical thing, like a draft and 2 rewrites, right? And then but you quickly run through those,
right?
And then they keep needing your
All right,
your
so
work.
at least they're not getting free work out of you. They're picking
No,
up.
then it turns into like either a day rate or a weekly rate.
Right.
And that's where I bought my house, like,
Right.
I made so much money on like my day rate. Like they would literally just like, Leica would call me and just be like, "Oh, we're going to record, an actor in a few days. Can you just go through all of their scenes and write like 3 or 4 alts for every joke? Just have a bunch of stuff." And I would spend a few days doing that. And then a day rate, you get paid really, really well. It's like that stuff adds up. Or they would be like, "We just need one more pass on the third act, or we just need to go through the whole script and remove this character." And like, so all these like little weekly assignments. And then you're just like, that was very lucrative,
Right.
doing it that way.
Hey, it's Michael Jamin. If you like my videos and you want me to email them to you for free, join my watch list. Every Friday, I send out my top 3 videos. These are for writers, actors, creative types. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. I'm not going to spam you, and it's absolutely free. Just go to michaeljamin.com/watchlist.
Do you usually, because you've done so much animation, and it sounds like you always set out to do animation. Is that?
I did set out to do it, and then like I didn't set out to only do it. I thought I could do both, but you kind of get pigeonholed a little bit. Like it's hard. I've gotten hired to write a few live action movies, but they were always like a live action movie that had an animation element to it. Like it'd be a hybrid movie or it'd be a family movie that they think, oh, because you've done family work, you can do this. But nobody would ever hire me to just do like a horror movie or whatever. And I don't know if I'd be the right guy for that either. I think my sensibility like tends to be more animation based, but it also, I think, movies are such a different thing than TV, where there's like, they're so expensive. If you're spending $80 million or whatever, you want to hire somebody that's done it before, so it's really, really hard for the studio bosses or even like the lower level executives to like fight to hire you if you've never done that kind of thing before. And so you kind of get like, it's not pigeonholed, because I love doing it and I love the work, but it's also like I get why I get hired for certain things and not for other things. But also I feel super lucky because animation is one of the only like parts of, or the only genres of film that has not shrunk over the years. Like, movies in general, like they stopped making live action comedies almost completely, except for some stuff on streamers. They don't make rom-coms anymore. They barely make action comedies. It's like they make superhero movies and Star Wars movies, but then animation movies are evergreen. And so I feel really lucky that I sort of fell into this area that there is still work to be had. So
yeah, I mean, because you really have put together, a really pretty impressive career. And I know not all your work is credited, but so what? I mean,
well, it's like it's either uncredited or there's so many projects that like died on the vine. So it's like you read my, I sent you that sort of list of credits, and it's like I'm looking it over earlier today. I'm like, oh, it's just a list of dead projects.
But that's expected when you go into. You go, okay, they're not all going to go. That's expected. That's all right.
I was looking at I was organizing my, it's a strike, so I have time to do these things. Organizing my folders on my computer and like putting everything in, and I had like over 150 folders of each one is its own project, and not all of those are work that I've done. Some of them are like, I got sent this thing like to pitch on, and then I had one meeting and it went away. And some of them I did, a few weeks on, or some of them I just did day work on, but like 150 projects over the years. Some of them I'm on for a year or two, or 3 years, so it's insane. And like, so the hit ratio is like super low of like I got really lucky when I transitioned out of TV and went into movies. It was like the first 2 things. Well, I sold a thing to DreamWorks that didn't get made, but then right after that, it was like Lego and Boxtrolls. They both came out in 2014, and I worked on both of them. And I was like, oh, this is going to be easy. Like you work on a movie, and then it comes out, and then it's like cut to 10 years later, and it's like nothing else with my name on it has come out. I've worked steadily. I've worked really well. I've been very happy, but it's like it's definitely like. It's a different thing than TV, where you're just working and getting credited all the time.
Well, yeah, but it also sounds like, I don't know. It sounds like to me, maybe I'm wrong. It sounds like you don't need to hustle as much doing what you do.
No, it's like I feel like it's the opposite because like on TV you can get on a show and you're running for years, but on a movie you always know
Yeah,
it's
but
going to end.
but they're coming to you. People are coming to you with offers. In other words.
Oh yeah, sometimes. I mean, yes, like the ones that end up happening, that's true. But like, there's so many that I'm just on a list at the studio, but I'm in a bake off with six
Oh,
other writers, and I don't get it.
right. So you
Like
put a lot of work. So people don't know what a bake off is. So this is when you have to pitch to get the job, and you have to put in
yeah,
several
yeah,
weeks of work. That's just
exactly.
the worst. That's just the
It's
worst.
like, and that's the majority of my life.
Oh, is it?
That's like, yeah, yeah. So it's like, there's definitely like, I mean, between Phil and Chris and Leica, I have, and a little bit of DreamWorks now. I'm doing my third movie for them right now, so that's pretty good. Over 10 years, three movies.
Uh-huh.
But like, other than those places, um, it's always like, you're getting sent stuff, and then, but that doesn't mean like they want you. It just means they want to hear a bunch of takes, and so you have
Yeah.
to like try to like fight for the job if you really want it, or like, and I used to spend months, or like, maybe a month coming up with the take and having every detail worked out. And then I realized over time, like, they don't actually want that. They want like a big idea and some themes and like some ideas
really?
of what the set pieces are. But like they want to know that I mean, honestly, it's like, it's such a, I don't even recommend that young writers go out for them, because you're not going to get it anyway, because
Mhm.
they're always going to go with somebody that has done it before. Like, especially, I mean, not always. If you could, like, you might be the rare exception, but like
Well,
so
then
much
what
of
do
it,
you recommend to young writers to do?
dude, I don't know. Like, I mean, I think you have to write great samples. I mean, I think
Uh,
that's the main thing, is like have samples that show that exactly what your voice is and
uh,
exactly what makes you different than everybody else and what you can bring to the table that nobody else can. I think
mhm.
that's the first thing. But to get like those open writing assignments, I think it's just a fool's errand to even try, because
Yeah.
they're just so risk adverse to hire anybody that hasn't done it before. I think the better shot that you have is to make smaller things,
Mhm.
and then they'll assume you've done it. It's like,
Right.
not even try to get these big studio things. Get a small
Right.
indie thing if you can, or make your own thing if you can, or
Yep.
like just try to work your way up in a smaller way. I mean, like, all the big name directors out there all started on small indie movies, and I think that's got to be the same for
Yeah.
writers now too, because there's so many fewer movies.
Is there anything that you're doing on the side just for the love of it, that you're
Hmm.
creating for yourself? Or is it,
I mean,
you know,
I haven't in the last few years. I haven't, because I've just been busy with work. But like during
yeah,
the pandemic, I had plenty of time because nobody was buying movies, and I had
right.
like wrapped up on something, and I had an idea that I thought was going to be my next big sale, and then it was an idea about a virus that went. It was a comedy thing, but it was
Right.
like um, it was this idea where it was like, it was sort of based on the idea that Christmas is getting longer and longer every year, where um, people put up their lights and and
Yeah.
decorations sooner and sooner, and you start seeing the stuff for sale in
And
October or
Halloween.
whatever,
Yeah.
at Halloween. And so I was like, oh, it felt like Christmas was like a virus that was slowly taking over the world. And I was like, what if it's like a zombie movie, but Christmas is the virus? And so it was sort of a Christmas apocalypse
Oh,
thing, where Christmas takes over the world and one family didn't get infected and had to fight back. So I was like, this is going to be a big seller. And then I was like, and then COVID hit. And
yeah.
it was like, nobody wanted to buy a thing
No.
about a virus taking over the world. And so I literally spent the pandemic, to answer your question, I wrote it as a novel instead. I wrote it as like a middle grade novel.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and it was
YA.
a YA novel. Yeah. So
Did you publish it?
not yet. We're trying. So we're like out to publishers, and we're like, it took a
Yeah.
while to like figure out like literary agents, which is a very different world and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the idea is to hopefully like sell it as a book and then be able to adapt it as a
Yes.
feature.
Right.
But yeah, it was so fun to write, and it was like so freeing to like not be stuck in like 110 pages and
Mm-hmm.
like have to have like, I mean, I already had the whole thing outlined from the pitch when I was going to pitch it, so I knew the structure of it. So I just
Right.
kept it as the
Oh,
structure of a
interesting.
movie, but I expanded on it and got more into the characters' heads and that kind of stuff. But I had such a fun time writing that, and I was just like, man, someday when the work dries up, I am gonna look forward to writing novels instead. And
Oh, yeah. The funny thing is, when you describe the literary word going out to publishers, it's not that different from Hollywood. You
no,
think it is, it's not. It's the same hell. You
Oh,
know?
absolutely. But the different, it's like, but you and I haven't had to deal with breaking into Hollywood in a long time. And
Uh-huh.
then in the literary world, they're like, oh, you've written movies? We don't care.
Oh,
What have you,
we don't care at all. Yeah.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like starting over, and like, you're in UTA, like tried to help a little bit, but they're like, we don't really know what to do. And then so it's like, I've been sort of like, when my manager has been introducing me to like,
Wow.
uh, editors and stuff, like, literary editors, and they've been really receptive, and it's been good trying to find the right one and like the person
Mhm.
I jive with. But it's very much like, oh, you're starting from scratch all over again.
Yeah.
And
For way less money.
no money. I mean, literally, it's like, oh, you cannot. I don't know how you would make a living off of this. I mean, I think we're spoiled a little bit, but like,
Yeah.
I
What
mean, not
was
that
the
like,
what was the money they were telling you? Can you say?
I don't want to say it
You
was
don't want to say.
but it was basically like about, it was less than a tenth that I would get paid on a
Yes.
movie,
Okay. Yeah.
and it's like, I mean, it would be like, it was about my weekly rate. So like, I was telling
Right.
you I do weekly jobs on movies,
Right.
and it's like that if I do a weekly on a studio movie, or I could sell a novel.
Right. Or you could work 5 years on a novel.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, this is not a way to support a family, but
Wow.
it was really fun. Like someday when I'm just doing it for fun, I would love to do it. Yeah.
Wow. How interesting. Wow. So your best advice, because you're not an animator, you're not even an artist, are you?
No, I don't draw or anything.
All
I
right.
just love animation. I just always loved animation. So I don't know. I think when I was like in seventh grade when The Simpsons started,
Mhm.
and that blew my mind. And I was like, I remember telling my dad, like, I think I want to write on this, and
Right.
just like, it was the first time I recognized, like, oh, people are writing these, because it was very like, I think more self-aware than most comedy was, and
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
I was like, in junior high, and I was just like, I want to be a writer on a show like this. And like, I
Right.
never was a writer on that show, but a bunch of other stuff. So, um,
Now, as far as directing, because I know you're attached to possibly direct this project,
hmm.
where does your confidence come from that to direct?
I mean, I don't know if I have confidence in it. I mean, like, I would want to like co-direct it. Like in animation, you often get paired with
Right.
another. Like if you're a writer, you'd get paired with like an experienced animation director who comes from
Hmm.
the visual side. So
Right.
either like an animator or a storyboard artist or
Right.
visual development artist. And I just feel like some of the projects I've been doing, you sort of act as more than just a writer anyway. Like you're sort
Mhm.
of meeting with the creative heads all the time, making these big decisions that affect the projects. And
Yeah.
at a certain point, I'm like, well, if I write something like that project that's at Leica that I was attached to co-direct, it probably won't even happen at this point. It's been a few years and it's
Uh-huh.
kind of sitting there waiting for Travis to decide if he wants to make it.
Right.
But it was like a personal project to me, and it was like this would be the one that I was like, I would really want to see this all the way through. And I'm sure at that studio at this point, he's Travis himself, who runs the studio, is kind of directing all the latest projects anyway. So I would be co-directing with him, and so he would really be in charge, and I would just be
Right.
still. I
Now
would be a
they're up in
writer
Seattle,
plus.
right?
Portland, yeah,
Portland.
Portland,
They're in Portland.
yeah, yeah,
So do you go up there a lot for?
yeah. When I'm like on a project, so usually it's like, if I'm just like writing it before it's greenlit, which is most of the time, I'll just fly up there for meetings just to
Hmm.
get launched or whatever, and then go back up after I turned it in to get notes. But if
Right.
it's in production, like on Boxtrolls, and then there's another upcoming one that I did a bunch of production work on, like they'll fly me up there to like work with the board artists and stuff. And that's a crazy, that place is so nice. It's like a wonderland. I mean, it's like this giant warehouse
Yeah.
downstairs that they have all the stages, and they're all
Yeah.
covered with like black, like velvet rope. I mean, black velvet curtains, so to keep all the light out and everything. And that's where
Right.
they're moving all the puppets and everything
Yeah.
for the stop motion. And then upstairs is like the offices, and it just feels like a corporate office building with cubicles and stuff. It's very weird. But you go downstairs, and it's like there's people animating. There's this huge warehouse where they're building all the props, and
Hmm.
another they're like armature section where they're adding all like the
Yeah.
skeletal armature to the
You never
puppets.
went
And
with us to, because Cuppa was like that in
yeah, yeah,
a cup of coffee in Toronto when they did
yeah.
where we did Glenn Martin. Yeah, it was amazing.
Similar, but like Kappa is doing it on a budget, and these guys are like
Yeah.
spending so much money. It's not a viable like way to make money, like to make these the stop motion animated movies. They don't do it to make money. Like he does it because he loves it.
Oh, really?
But oh my gosh, yeah, because Travis Knight is like the son of Phil Knight, who founded Nike, so he's got sort of a lot of money, and it's his hobby.
Shoe money.
You know,
Yeah.
he's got shoe money,
Yeah.
but he's a brilliant animator. He's a super smart, like interesting dude who wants to make things that are different than anybody else. And so it's like it's an amazing place to work because you kind of nowhere else do you ever have the conversation of like, oh, we could do this if we wanted to do it where more people would see it, or we could do it this way, which is cooler, and we want to do this because it's fun and weird, and you know, like it's like he kind of like, not that he doesn't care about an audience, he does care about an audience, but it's not like most important to him is making something that's awesome to him for the art. Yeah. And so it's a very different way of looking at things. But like I've been in situations there where it's like we're doing like upstairs doing a rewrite with like me and the director, like changing the whole third act or whatever. And then I go downstairs and like just tour the stages and the workshops, and I'll meet like a puppeteer who's like building this giant puppet who's like telling me like, this is the biggest puppet that's ever been created in stop motion, and here's like the 17 different places where I can articulate it. And I'm just thinking like, dude, we cut that yesterday upstairs.
Oh no.
And he's been working on it for like a month. You know, but I can't say anything. I'm just sort of like, oh yeah, that's awesome, it's so great, you're doing great work. Anyway, I'm gonna get back upstairs. You know,
that's so heartbreaking.
But like they burn through so much money like just doing it all by hand. It's so crazy, but it's so beautiful, you know, so I love it.
And so you were literally upstairs, like, you know, they gave you a small office and you just start typing?
Yeah, that's literally, I mean, usually when I'm there, it's like they just put me in some random cubicle that nobody else is using. Or it's not a cubicle, like a little office that is empty or whatever, like somebody that.
And you'll stay there for a few days or a few weeks?
Yeah,
or what?
exactly. Like depending on how much they need me. So it'll either be a few days or a few weeks. And then like on Boxtrolls, I was like up there for like, I'd be up there for like a week re-outlining some stuff, and then I'd come back home for 2 weeks and write those pages up. And like, and then, I mean, I'd be writing in the evenings after the meetings and stuff too while I was up there. But like when we are rewriting, it's like, it's a train that's moving, and it's like the track is like, you're running on a track and you got to keep like,
there's a real pressure. What did you think of staying there in Portland? Did you like it?
I did like it. I mean, it's like, it's hard because my family's here and like, you know, life is here. But like, you know, if that movie had gone that I was attached to co-direct, we were planning on moving there, you know, for that, you know, for 3 or 4 years.
For 3, that's how it would take. Interesting. Would you have sold your house here or just rented it out?
I'd have rented it out, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah. I know. It was like we are having all these conversations. And then it's like, the longer it goes, we're like, that's probably not going to happen. We don't have to think about this right now.
How interesting. That's so key. Yeah, because it really takes that long, man.
Oh yeah, they're so long. And then also it's like, and there is like this weird thing in animation where like, it's not uncommon for like a movie to go through 2 or 3 directors over the course of its many years in production. So it's like,
why?
I mean, and I know just because they're beasts, and they, you know, sometimes, you know, in the same way that you're changing the story so many times over the years, sometimes you make such a drastic change that it's no longer the vision of that director, and like it's just not a right fit anymore. And I've seen that happen on a lot of movies that I've been on over. I mean, like Boxtrolls didn't end up with the same 2 directors that it started with. One of the 2 stayed on it, but the other one didn't.
This sounds very frustrating to me. It sounds, it does.
And then like other movies up there have gone through different directors, and like, you know, so I was like, even if I had gotten hired as the director, I was like, in the back of my head, I always knew like this might not last, even if you know, I'll do my best and I'll try to make it work. But you know,
you haven't even started and you're planning on being fired.
Yeah, totally. You know, but it's like, I mean, it's a weird thing. It's not like TV where you're on a show for like a year and then like hopefully you get the second year if you know, if you get one. It's like in movies, they fire and hire different writers all the time. And so directors less so, but writers, it really is pretty common. Like I've been on both sides of it where it's like, I used to like take it really hard, or you're fired off a movie. You're like, oh my God, did they not like the draft I did? And usually it's like, no, we liked it, but now there's a director on it and they want to take a different direction. Or like, oh, the director has a friend that they want to work with as a writer, that they work with as a writer. Or, and other times I've been that guy that a director has brought on to rewrite somebody else. And like, I always try to be super nice about it. Now that I've seen both sides of it, I always try to reach out to the previous writer and be like, hey, I just want you to know it's in good hands, or like, or sometimes like if I'm the one that's fired, I reach out and be like, hey, if you want to know where the skeletons are buried, like happy to get lunch with you, just to be like, here's
Yeah.
the pitfalls to look out for. This is
People
where
don't
the
realize that. People on the outside just don't realize what it's actually like when you're the writer. I mean, you're a successful working writer, and I think they have a very different vision of the
oh yeah,
reality of,
100%. I didn't
yeah.
know the job was I thought the job was going to be writing the whole time. Most of the job is like it's playing politics with like the studio and the executives and the director and like
Well, what do you mean
the
politics?
you know
Navigating the notes? What do you mean?
yeah. I mean, it's like the notes, but also the personalities. It's like a
Wow.
lot of the job, I
Wow.
feel like, is to go in and be like, to make everybody feel comfortable with where you're taking it,
Yeah.
like, because you walk into a room and sometimes you could feel like, oh, the director thinks they're making a very different movie than the head of development thinks, then that's different than what the producer thinks, and that's different than what the head of the studio thinks. It's like I've been in a room with
Wow.
like where it's like Jeffrey Katzenberg is just like, guys, you're all thinking about this all wrong. And you just have to be like, okay, how can I find solutions that makes everybody happy,
Yeah.
like that make everybody happy? And that's a huge part of the job. I mean, honestly, when I did the Lego rewriting with Phil and Chris, that's what the whole job was just like, how do I make Warner Brothers, who didn't know what they had, they thought it was like a toy commercial. They were very
Hmm.
skeptical of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And Phil and Chris, who wanted to make some beautiful art and like it was
Yeah.
cool with cool ideas, and Lego Corporation, who wanted to make a toy commercial, and
Yes.
and Lucasfilm, who didn't want their characters to be in it, and DC, who didn't know whether they should be or not. I mean, it's like, and you're just like, how do I get in a room and make and like just like, and usually like if you come up with a great gag or a great joke that like articulates or that illuminates the tone of the thing, so they
Yeah.
all go, oh, okay, that's the thing,
See,
but
the
like,
round of notes, like you're saying,
oh, it's
what,
incredible. It's
but from
unending.
everybody, and everyone's got conflicting. I don't even know, like walking into that
Yeah.
job.
And all I care about is like, I don't want my friends Phil and Chris to think I fucked up their movie.
Right.
Like, because they're trusting me just to like keep it moving.
But
And
even I would think, even for them, it's like, how do I get this movie made when I have so many competing notes,
yeah.
and
Well,
and to their credit, they came up with something great, but still.
that is 100% to their credit. They have a genius ability to, not only are they great writers and great directors, I think more than that, they have this sense of how to make everybody in a room think that the ideas came from them.
Oh yeah.
It's like, yeah, they're great at like, they'll go into a room, I think sometimes having some ideas in their pocket, but
Hmm.
like, and it feels like the room came up with the ideas, together.
Uh-huh.
And then everybody's like, yes, we did it, pat ourselves on the back. And everybody, the executives leave happy. But sometimes it actually does come out that. I mean, those brainstorm sessions really do create a new idea, and sometimes it's them trusting the process that that's going to work out, and sometimes I think they literally are like, "Well, we can go this way or this way, but I know it'll be easier if they think they had the idea, so let's go this way
Yeah.
for now, and then later we could always." They know it's going to change 1,000 times anyway in the storyboards, and then they could figure it out for real later, because all
See,
these
people like that, they're very well paid, but in my opinion, they're earning every penny of it.
100%, they are earning every like they. I
It's
could
not that
never
easy,
be.
this job.
Yeah.
It's,
I feel like I've gotten better over the years where I've like taken my ego out of it. I used to have
mm,
a much bigger ego, you might remember, but I I feel like I can be like, now I can just go in a room and be like, I'm just gonna try to help. I'm just gonna be like, how could I make everybody feel comfortable? How can I make everybody feel like we're on the right page together and create this thing? Because I know that it's like the process is going to take years and years, and the relationship is more important than the individual
yes,
story note or
right,
whatever. It's like
right,
that's what's going to matter over the
hmm,
long term of this project.
right.
It's like that we all trust each other and that we can make something great together, and that's more important than like fighting for a joke or fighting for like
Or
a
even an
story moment.
idea or a take, or
Yeah,
even
exactly.
you're right. It's about fighting the relationship, and I've said this before. It's about the relationship is the most important thing, and sometimes you have to sacrifice what you think is, the best story, the best moment for the greater good of the relationship. Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
100%. Yep.
Wow, I feel like this has been eye opening, even for me, and I feel like my eyes are fucking opened. You know what I'm saying? Like, I haven't, we've done some movie work, but obviously we work mostly in TV. But the movie side was never really appealing. I remember because we shared the same agent for our features. And I remember he gave us a conversation. I was like, I don't know if I want to work in movies again.
It is weird. Hard. I mean, like, it's different because, like, in TV, you're the boss, right? I mean, when you're the showrunner,
you're the boss.
You've been that for a long time. And in movies, you're never the boss. I mean, it's like I gave up on. I mean, I before I worked with you, there was one TV show I ran and I co-ran with my friend Tim, and we were the bosses, and I hated it. I did not enjoy it. It was like all the meetings and all the decisions and the budgets and the interpersonal relationships and all that stuff. I was not good at it back then, and I don't know if I'd be better now. And I just was like, you know what, I just want to like be part of a team, and I want to be a writer. And it's like in movies, that's what you are. You're just part of this big team, and in a different way. I mean, I guess when you're a staff writer or coming up through the ranks in TV, you're part of a team too. But you can be like, you're also like a much more integral part of the team because you're the one writer on it at the time, or like, in movies, when you're the writer, you're the writer, and they all look to you for that one job. Or if you're on a staff, like when I'm on a show with you or whatever, like you might look to me for one type of, it's like, it's very different. I'm a cog in this room, I just like, it's never like, you never have to be 100% on your A game every day for, you can phone it in a little bit.
Coast. Wow. Adam Pava, what an interesting conversation. This is enlightening for me. Very enlightening. Yeah, man.
Are you having everybody on from the old days? I saw you had Brian.
Well, I had Alex Berger on a while ago. We talked a little bit about that script that you guys wrote together. It was, there's two things on Glenn Martin. You were always pestering me to do musical.
Yeah.
Like, Papa, I don't know how to write a musical. And you're like,
and I've like gone on. This is why I work in animated features. So I've written like 3 musicals since I've. I
so we let you do the movie, and I was like, dude, I don't know how to do it. So go ahead, knock yourself out.
That was.
And then
fun.
You guys came back with that Christmas episode. I thought you guys both hit it out of the park. I was like, let's shoot it. Let's shoot it.
That was. I think it took because that was all second year stuff, and it was like it took a little bit of time to like figure out tonally what we were doing, and then like just to get a little crazier, and then like I mean those episodes were like I could be a little bit more like myself of like writing the weird stuff that I wanted to. I mean the other one I remember fondly is that weird Funshine episode. Or Funshine, was that the musical one, or was that
dude?
Funshine was the it was like the planned community in Florida that was basically Celebration Florida, and it was like if they all realized everybody was on being drugged and were lactating out of their
that's what now I remember. The guy, there was a scene where there's a pregnant man or something.
Yeah. It was fucking nuts. And I was like, oh, now we're writing the show that I could write. Like the first year, I think it was a little bit more like I was a little square peg in a round hole, where it was like, it was a lot. I didn't have a family at the time, and it was a family show. It was about a dad and a mom trying to navigate their crazy kids. And I was like, I don't know what the fuck.
We got crazy in that show. It's a shame that never went. It's a shame we didn't do more seasons, because we went nuts.
It was fun. It was a fun time for sure.
I got some of the puppets right over there. So
I got the one you gave me of me, like that one from the college episode.
Oh, right. The college episode. That's right. We put you you ran the gauntlet, I think, didn't you?
I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
Funny. Adam Pava, where can people, is there anything you want, we can plug, people find you? Are you active on social media? Is there anything?
I'm not super active. I mean, I'm on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter, Adam Pava, or at Adam, or whatever it's called now, X. I'm on X, but I'm not super active on it. I don't have anything to plug. Everything I'm working on is going to come out in 4 years. Like,
right. Yeah, look for Adam Pava in 4 years when something drops to the movies. That's the process. Dude, thank you again so much for doing this. This was a really interesting conversation. I haven't spoken to anybody about this kind of stuff. You are a wealth of information. All right.
Yeah, it's fun.
Everyone, thank you so much. Until the next episode drops, which will be next week, keep writing.
This has been an episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin and Phil Hudson. If you're interested in learning more about writing, make sure you register for Michael's monthly webinar at michaeljamin.com/webinar. If you found this podcast helpful, consider sharing it with a friend and leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. For free screenwriting tips, follow Michael Jamin on social media at Michael Jamin Writer. You can follow Phil Hudson on social media at Phil A. Hudson. This podcast was produced by Phil Hudson. It was edited by Dallas Crane. Music by Ken Joseph. Until next time, keep writing.